Hello and welcome everybody. This is SIG API Machinery for Kubernetes Open Source bi-weekly meeting. Today is the middle of April 2026, April 15th, and we are having our bi-weekly meeting. We are missing today two of our tech leads, but before starting this recording, we agreed that we will try to make progress on some of the topics we have to demonstrate them that we can survive without them, or we can try. And then if there are follow-up questions, we can continue when they are back. Very good. So why don't we go to the first one, which is the cell test tooling proposal. Who wants to take this over?
I can take over if that's all right.
Sure.
Yeah, cool. This is my first meeting, so I don't know things. Yeah, so this issue has been open for some time, and like it's basically around providing tools or some sort of way to test any cell code written in like or used in Kubernetes, for example, web map, whatever have you. And I wrote down a proposal basically like structuring out how that would look like. And since like each cell environment in Kubernetes is a little bit different and like is bucketed uh, around features, the proposal focuses on right now only for web map and webhooks, and like how cell expressions written there uh, could be tested if people wanted to. And so that's the gist of it. Uh, this proposal basically includes one upstream change in API server that exposes the create environment function, then a separate Go library, and then a CLI built on top of that Go library to make the testing of those objects easier. Um, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, so I think I looked into this proposal. So there is only one change that will be done in Kubernetes KK code base, and I think you can make that change without cap. Also, it's just exporting a new method, and you also need to create a new repo to host this tool. So I think you can start that process separately. I'm not aware whether this group needs to approve that thing, but I think you should be able to do that without us also.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure. Do I need to like reach out to somebody to get that approval? Do you guys know? Or
Do, do you actually need a repo, or would a testing package underneath maybe the API server repo make more sense? It seems like it would have to depend on an existing repo that had all the environment building logic. So I would probably start with like a dedicated testing package within one of the existing repos where it makes the most sense.
so, but that's kind of that's where the decision was to be on its independent repo, because let's say if the goal is to like provide more cell tooling around other parts where like cell is being used, then does it make sense to have all the like testing packages in one repo versus like in individual packages under source one?
I think all of the use cases we're talking about, webhooks, admission, authorization, authentication, I think all of those live in the API server repo.
Yeah, and the other things that you could test are just really different use cases. Like, DRA is just not the same as admission. I also think that while we're doing that, we should give people a point or two, depending on what you're doing. Just testing the cell expression might not be enough. You might really want to run something closer to inf test, where you like integration test with the API server. But like that, we probably recommend that is tiered. Don't jump to that for the first thing. I would strongly encourage starting within one of the existing repos. There's a lot of boilerplate to spinning up a new repo and changing the like import graph for everyone. I think most people that are working with admission, it should not be a problem to import one of our staging repos. And then that means as far as developing this code, it's all in the Kubernetes mono repo, developed the same as, the environment that it's providing tests for. And we should have some meta tests there.
I was gonna ask how you perceive this as being different from something like the Cell Playground tool that exists. That's something that I point people to fairly frequently when it comes to writing like cell validations for CRDs, as like a tool to help you play around and test certain things. Um, I wonder if maybe that's also a good place to maybe do some contribution here, but I haven't read your proposal, so I don't really know like the nitty-gritty details of like what doesn't exist that you might need to facilitate that. But I do
Yeah.
know that they already like pull in some of the cube cell libraries. I think they're a little outdated.
Right. Like
But
the outdatedness, like the lack of fidelity and the lack of synchronization seem like the benefits to having it be in a testing package that is actually using the same functions that the Kubernetes code does. So if you're running against Kubernetes 136 and you're building against the 136 testing package, like this behaves the same as Kubernetes does.
Yeah, that was one of the goals, and then the other one was to build a CLI wrapper so that people who don't want to write Go code to test stuff or like their YAML files, they can do it as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I think if we are creating a new package, then it would need a cap. Jordan, are we right?
Not necessarily. If the service area is like just a package, we're not shipping new like images or. I don't know that it necessarily needs a cat. If it's already written, like and we're describing what we're doing, it's fine. But if this isn't production code, it's not affecting the released binaries we like put into production. We've made like testing framework additions without writing a cat before. So
Okay, so which means like he can start sending out PRs and
Yeah.
we can start
if it's not touching production code or production binaries, then
And there's
it's
only
pretty
one change, right? Like the exposing of that function, which is like create cell environment or something. But Lalit already said that should be fine.
yeah. I think that's reasonable to propose a PR, and we can.
All right, not touching production, and it isn't like cross SIG. This is a well-scoped API machinery thing, so API machinery can just review it as is, does not have to require a cap. If we wanted to say that, we expect all other SIGs to adapt to this or something, then we might do a cap, but I don't see that here.
And as we've shown many times, all you have to do is like be available and useful, and you will attract so much usage.
Yeah. And so that brings me to my next question, which is like the other phase of this was, as I mentioned, to build a CLI tool around that. Should that live in its own repo under Kubernetes, or it could be like somewhere else, just utilizing the upstream packages? What do you guys think? Or this could be part of Kube Validate as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We have little helper tools like in Code Generator and some of our testing binary tools. That has a little bit more surface area because it's actually like a command line tool. Presumably, people will install and like depend on the flags to not change and break them release over release. Yeah, I would maybe start with like the the Go helpers and then think about how we could make that easily run on like a folder of YAML files, things like that. Some of the things you would want to do, though, often are, given this manifest, evaluate these positive and negative cases against it. That starts to get really fiddly, like running, like all the inputs of setting up a table test, essentially, that gets really fiddly running as a command line tool. Like you kind of want to run it as a table test and have like, here's the policy, here's the things I expect to pass, here's the things I expect to fail with the errors they expect to fail. Like that's probably better structured in like a real programming language rather than a mess of command line flags.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So sounds like start with the package and then see if like there's still need for a CLI tool and then go from there.
Yeah.
Jay, can I ask you a favor? Can you try to capture the outcomes of this conversation and the next steps here in the notes?
Yes. Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you so much. Okay, what about next one? Jordan, sorry to put you on the spotlight. Do you think you can help us cover this one, or we delay this one until Joe and David are back?
I don't really have. I'm trying to remember. This is coming back from a previous call where you recommended a distinct REST type that could have life cycle around it. I would probably wait until you have like more of the people who would need to take a look at it. This seems like a good topic when the tech leads for API Machinery.
Yeah, I feel the same, and I apologize that they are not here.
I'm not sure that API Machinery is the right spot to review the specifics of this API. Like API Machinery's recommendation was, this seems like it should be modeled with a distinct REST API. If you have questions about that modeling, that's fine, but what specifically goes in spec and what specifically goes in status seems more like this is an API for the Node folks to review. Like, so if there are questions about the machinery aspects, that could be fine here, but machinery doesn't review all APIs.
Yeah, Peter Hunt is also here from Signot. He joined the meeting, but essentially our question is about we have two approaches for restoring a pod, and we have to decide which approach to use. So from the previous meeting, the suggestion was to follow the precedent from volume snapshots, where we have essentially we create an object request that will trigger the restore functionality, and this is what we have been exploring. But the other option was to essentially modify the pod specification with additional field restore from. So essentially, the idea is that creating a pod and restoring from a pod from a checkpoint are very similar, and what we can do is we can just modify the pod specification instead of creating a new essentially pod restore object. The challenge here from what we discussed in last meeting was that it would be difficult to separate the permissions. So for example, if we need to have different permissions for creating a pod from restoring a pod from a checkpoint, then essentially applying these permissions to the restore from field might be challenging. Does that help, Jordan?
Okay. Yeah.
I think Peter also has some comments, and he can.
Yeah, well, I guess, a question, I suppose, for the room, based on what, Jordan, you were talking about. Is this the appropriate place to bring, like, questions on what would be, like, an idiomatic API structure? If not, then we can go async API review, basically.
Yeah, that's probably more like API review Slack channel or
Totally.
API review list. I mean, it's all the same. Not all the same people, but many of the same people. So the two, like, just to save you a little bit of time, if you think about all existing clients of the pod API, all existing clients of the pod API would be confused by a pod showing up with a restore from field set. Like they wouldn't understand what that means, or know that that meant the pod wasn't ready to be like processed. So does that have implications for like the definition of the pod? Is it wrong for the pod spec to be inconsistent with the pod that the snapshot was taken from, or the checkpoint was taken from?
I guess the restore functionality is one of the challenge. When we restore from a checkpoint, we don't really want to restart, essentially to try the restore multiple times, or at least it will have different semantics. I think this is one of the challenges that we discussed. But Peter?
Yeah, I think, well, something that I think about in trying to decide what to do with how to do a restore is I think ultimately whatever we create will bubble down into a pod object, right? Like I don't think that we should make a friend object to a pod that is just a pod but restored. And because of that, like there will probably need to be some number of fields added to the pod to be able to have the user express the intent that it's coming from a restore rather than newly created. And because of that, like the intermediary object doesn't make so much sense to me. Like we're still going to have to figure out the authentication problem where maybe some people are allowed to do restores, but they're not allowed to, or are not allowed to do restores, but are allowed to create pods. So that's sort of where my thinking is. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is, I'm totally open to hearing that we should go somewhere else and ask and talk elsewhere.
This sounds like an API review question. Like the mechanics of it are like, if you want to add a field, here's how you add a field.
Right.
So this does seem like a pretty, in some ways novel, in some ways sort of following volume snapshot, but in some ways novel. Yeah. So I would spin up a thread either on the mailing list, the API review mailing list, or in Slack, and you can tag me in and we can talk through some of the.
Thank you. I guess one question to just preempt an inevitable conversation now that we're synchronous. Is there any amount of precedent for, from the machinery side or RBAC permissions of restricting access to certain fields within an object versus?
Yeah, it not. There's plenty of precedent. It's messy and sort of inconsistent every time we do it. Sometimes it's enforced in the registry, sometimes it's enforced in RBAC, sometimes it's enforced in admission.
So something that I then will have to think about, and I think we're going to pretty quickly start to ask you, Jordan, or anyone who's more experienced with this, is if we were to do this, which way should we do it? Like, which way do we like best? And so if you want to precede that thought process for yourself, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, if we expect the behavior to be consistent in all servers for everyone, we don't really want to make it like optional. Then baking it into like the lowest level possible, like the registry storage implementation for this type is probably where we would go. So that's where we did things like in RBAC, when you do a create or an update, we make sure you're not escalating your permissions. Or in the cell-based admission stuff, if you're referencing a parameter type, we make sure you actually have access to read from that parameter type. So like some of those invariants that we want to be consistent in every cluster everywhere, we don't really want to put them in an optional admission layer that someone could turn off. Or so we've tended to do it in the actual storage implementation.
Great. All right, that's good to know. So we'll start that thread and hash out a little bit more of where we're thinking, and give the examples that we're basing it off of, and we can go from there. We basically wanted to have this conversation with API people before bringing it to Node, because Node can improve the shape of
we spent a month figuring out the details of something that we are then told
exactly
is not good at all. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So and mechanic so the API feels like the first barrier of entry, which is why we're here. But that's great. We can go online.
And you were lucky that you have a multi-phase Jordan that uses all the hats in a single person.
Yes.
Like a Hydra.
Actually, if we had animated movies, like Jordan movie, you should talk to the API reviews people, and then he joins with a different shirt or a different hat. Okay, I'm the
the other Jordan.
Okay, can either Peter or Radostin capture a summary of next steps under the topic that you suggested here for posterity, please?
Yes,
yeah, no problem. I can do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both.
Great, thank you.
I'm glad it was in the end useful discussion. Okay, let's go to the next one, Michael.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we want to wait till the next meeting, but wanted to kind of get the ball rolling on this one. Basically, in 136, we've done a lot of work on the stale controller mitigation, but right now it only really works for create and update requests. And this is due to the API server portion of it. When a client sends a create or update request, it gets the object back as what was actually like written to storage. So that provides the resource version for that object. But unfortunately, delete does do that in most cases, but there's a couple of scenarios, I think, or maybe just one scenario that doesn't do that because the object may not be in storage anymore. And that leads to some issues with like the controller mitigation because we're getting an old object back, we're getting stale objects. So I was wondering like some ways to possibly get this like moving forward. This came from a discussion with the controller runtime folks. They want a way for the deletion to work, and I think it's also important for us to fully like push like the stale controller mitigation to GA. I was thinking of a couple ways to get this moving. I think we could. The reason that this happens from what I was looking through in the API server code is that there might be two concurrent deletes happening, right? And so two different API servers are processing the same deletion. There's a race condition. One of them deletes the object from the store. We don't want the other one to fail because technically it's also successful, but it doesn't know what object it deleted from storage. So I was thinking there might be some way to just track delete events which happen during the deletion process to like fix the scenario or something like that. But I was wondering if anybody has some suggestions on this. I know Marek has worked a lot on like the watch cache, and Jordan might also, because I saw that you were recently working on this section of the deletion.
Yeah, I guess the first question I would have is what resource version are we wanting to come back from a delete?
Yeah, it's the resource version of that like deletion happening inside of the like storage, right? So even if it's like from a different deletion request, in that case, it's still technically the deletion event that happened in storage.
Yeah, I guess there's three possibilities. One is I issued a delete, and that was the thing. Like that write to etcd is what removed the key value.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we get back like the etcd revision. That's the best case scenario.
And it's like the normal case, but then there's always the chance of like race conditions happening.
The second one is I issue a delete and race with another delete. So I'm not actually sure we know the, like if we race, I'm not sure we know the revision where the key we're looking at was removed. I'm not sure we can get that.
What I was thinking is maybe piggyback off like the watch cache or something like that that we have, but that gets pretty tricky pretty quickly. But
that's bleeding across a lot of layers. The third possibility is you try to do a delete, we race, and we get back a not found error from etcd, if that not found error tells us the current etcd revision, that is a revision where the object we're asking to be deleted did not exist.
Yeah.
Would it be, I was trying to figure out if it would be bad to report that as the resource version for the
my concern with that is like the gap in between, like that time. Like if there is a deletion that happened and then there's something that happens and then we report that error, there might be some gap where we miss events or something along.
But this is in response to a particular delete request.
Yeah.
Like it's not in a watch stream. So if if it had been successful, like I was trying to think through like what would the implications of that be. The object that comes back from deletions is a status object, which we could put a resource version into. I was playing around with this a little bit. So my first thought was when we get the object back correctly, take the version from it, put it in the status, we send back. When we get a not found, if we can get the current etcd version at that not found moment, and we're going to report success, like it's successfully deleted, it's gone, maybe it would be fine to put the etcd version where the object was gone as the deletion version. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that way was something, I was thinking about at the beginning, but like there's some nuance to like think about in that scenario, like whether or not that's a valid resource version to return.
Yeah.
So what words, so you mentioned racing, I assume like two writes, or I assume it translates to delete that didn't encounter an object returns success.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
That's what happens in the API server at the moment. In certain scenarios, there's like a bunch of ifs, but basically there's like some case that happens where if you return the not found and like some other things, like ignore not found, last existing, not equal nil, then you still say, oh, I'm deleting, and you just use the old object that you've gotten at the beginning and you just return that back.
There are existing correctness problems with race conditions on delete, and it's almost always around where the server is first reading the object to see if it has any finalizers that are blocking deletion, and then saying, okay, there are no finalizers, we're good to delete, and then hitting like a conflict with some other write to that key. And then when it goes to look up the object again, the object is gone.
Yep.
And so like returning a 404 in that case feels really dumb. Like the user said, please delete this object. And you come back and you say, the object was there a second ago and now it's not there. And by the way, your deletion failed. It's like, you're telling me the object's not there. That's exactly what I wanted. Why is that a failure? Why is that not success? So there are a couple existing races around deletion in that case. So we need to be careful here. I think we could maybe improve this. And at the very least, we could return resource version when we have it, and we could return like empty when we don't.
Yeah.
I think that would be better. As long as the places that start using the resource version are aware of the possibility of not getting it. But all old servers won't return it in the deletion status. So they already need, as clients, they need to handle that possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, the tricky one. So yeah, I'll keep thinking about it. I just wanted to propose it to this just to see like.
I mean, you and I had talked about it. I think if you want to start a thread on the mailing list, mailing list might be a good place to do it, just to make sure people who are out of the office get get it in their inbox, and we can kind of have the conversation be a little more permanent than the meeting or in Slack.
Good.
Yeah, I would want to understand if there is anything on etcd side that we like. If the I'm not. I haven't read like through the lead path if there's any like checks or like with watchcache also. I expect there like for updates there are, but yeah, but it would be good to check if etcd can do anything. Like we have transaction logic, we can return the current revision, we can, I don't know if we can look up the previous delete revision, but but it would be, yeah, I would need to look into that personally. For the finalizer, I haven't. Yeah, I think I delegate to Jordan. Knows more about that part.
Yeah, the nice thing is that once we get like all of this like hashed out, then essentially that means that we could transition almost everything which uses like controller expectations over to this model, which like is a pretty decent amount of savings, like both in like space and there's some correctness issues that keep popping up around expectations, like either like they time out or all of these different things. So getting this would be a pretty nice thing to have.
Okay, sounds like, Michael, I will leave the next steps to you, starting this offline discussion for the people that is out and follow-up items. Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, very good. And unless somebody thinks that any of the items on the backlog are worth discussing today, which they are not in the agenda, I think we should end it here for today. It was actually useful to go through the things, but yeah, that concludes our agenda. In other words, anybody has anything else they wanted to add before we close today?
I think similarly, the other backlog items probably make sense when we have more leads present.
Yeah. And publicly, thank you, Jordan, for taking the baton and covering all the areas that you can cover in their absence. Appreciate that as always. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I will upload the recording later today and send the notification. And let's continue the conversation in a couple of weeks. Thank you and have a great Wednesday. Bye-bye.